All right, so today's video, we are reacting to YouTube comments that we have in our videos. It's something we've been doing recently. People seem to like it. Tell me what you think. Leave a comment. All of that will help. If you haven't subbed to the YouTube yet, make sure to do so. So we looked at some of the comments we had recently. I think this is actually after our Season 10 video we did where I gave my thoughts on Season 10. And we have a, couple of different subjects here. One of them is Clash. So I think it's you know what? Why not? Let's talk about Clash. Clash, I think, is just about to finish up on the test playthrough. So I'm going through the comments, kind of responding to it, seeing what people think, and then we kind of go from there. So first one here is, I like Clash because it's the opposite of Flashpoint. Constant battles and no walking back to the point. Imagine if I just left it at that sentence, like just to kind of give you like a slight react to that. Yeah, Clash is fun. I like Clash. I mean, my opinion on Clash has been it's a fun mode. I like that it has that deathmatch feel, but in like a competitive style of it, right? Like I'll joke a lot about how, oh, this game has turned into a deathmatch. This game has turned into a deathmatch, right? I joke about it all the time. But it's like a competitive deathmatch that feels good. I like it. I know there's some issues with it. I know there's some like a little bit of an issue of like the comeback mechanic where like it always feels like it ends up 5-4. Understandable. Another issue is like, chat, I challenge you, when you play Clash, to find two megas on the map. There's only one that I can find right now in Hanaoka. I couldn't tell you if there's two. But I feel like sometimes the health packs are a little bit harder to find, especially when you want to keep doing that. That's a little bit my concern. But yeah, that was the, Shiny over here, wanted to bring up that comment, which, yeah, I don't mind that. That one had, a decent amount of upvotes. But this next one has a lot of upvotes from the video. And this one from Paul says, for me, Clash feels like being on overtime 24/7, and it's too easy for everyone to forget everything about grouping up or taking time to position well. It immediately devolves into trickling in. Now, maybe this is a bit of a hot take by me, but I feel like in most ranks, getting that good position and to begin with isn't happening. So while I understand the overtime 24/7, which it's kind of interesting. I don't mind that, right? It's a little bit different than what we have now. So this game mode actually is a little bit more forgiving on if you have bad positioning because there's so much like natural cover, but I've actually kind of talked about how I like the map design of Clash. I like the way it plays. It feels like there's a lot of opportunity for retakes, and because it feels like overtime 24/7, which it very much can, I kind of like that. I like that it has this aggressive play style. It has this different approach to how you play Overwatch, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but I like the way the map plays. Now, granted, keep in mind, just like with anything, my opinion on this could change in 4 months or 5 months. Whenever this mode's out and we play it in ranked, I might be like, what in the world is going on right now, right? What is going on in Clash, right? From an initial, limited time, putting time into Clash, I've actually enjoyed it. I really have. It's not going to fit everybody's play style. It's not going to be the perfect, game mode for everybody, but like, this has been the most optimistic I've seen about a new game mode in a long time. I saw a lot of complaints about Push, about Flashpoint. Clash feels like there's a little bit less complaints about it, more of like, if you could just fix this one thing, it will play a lot better. So it's interesting to see, to say the least. And then we have one more here from Fudge saying, my issue with Clash is that one team can get rolled the entire game and get pushed back to the last objective. And because it is so easy to defend, 95% of the time they will defend it and be rewarded a point for it. This leads to a team being rolled the entire game and winning because they captured the middle objective once. You shouldn't be able to win the game without seeing the other team's side of the map once. It doesn't feel right. The easiest fix would be make it so the defending the final objective doesn't give you a point. And truthfully, I think that is where the back and forth of this map will come from. Is, do you give the defending team a point for capping the point? And that is going to be the number one question for Clash, right? I'm actually kind of curious, and this is just, look at chat, we're becoming a YouTuber. Let me know what you think about that in the comments, because my guess is they've probably tested both of those, and they've looked at like both the positives and the negatives about that. My slight take on this one, I haven't minded the 5-4s. I could see that getting a little bit more frustrating if you go on like imagine like going on like a streak of like you play 4 clashes in like 10 games, and then you lose all 4 to basically your team dominating, but then they eventually get the last point. So maps sometimes need to have comeback mechanics, or they just do in general. Pretty much most maps have that. Over like Push, for example, a comeback mechanic. They get the checkpoint, right? You get an instant spawn once. Bit of a comeback mechanic, right? You get instant spawns based off of checkpoints. You have when you push a cart on, like, let's give you an example, Dorado. There's a comeback mechanic where the team on defense has time to kind of set up. before you can move the card. It goes to that RPN maps, right? With Clash, it's like, do they need that? And I think that's kind of where you have that back and forth of like a comeback mechanic. This basically just gives teams opportunity to have a chance, so you're not feeling like you're getting stomped all the time. I think that's the question. Should the team in the like the last point get a point for retaking their own point? Should they not? It's a good question. I don't know. It's funny because I've only played it the one way. So honestly, I think something that could be very interesting. What if they were to bring back Clash sometime during mid-season and say, we want to test it this way? And then you can have a better idea and then get the results. And then I think that is going to be a really good way to get that data on how people feel about Clash. Like, okay, that didn't feel good. I prefer if you get a point. Or if that felt great, Clash. So that is probably what I would like to see, especially if Clash isn't coming out next season. We still have like, what, 3 to 4 months before we even see this game mode? Maybe one more testing opportunity for players to give it a try it with a couple of these fixes, see how it is, and then set it for launch. I think that'd be a good idea, and I'd love to see that. So bring up a valid point, though. We're moving on to Venture.
I can dig that.
They quote me from my video saying, I'm interested to see how the backline deals with Venture. Their response with, that's the funny part. They don't. Now, out of curiosity, does that happen a lot in your games? Do you find that Venture is making it so your backline is just unkillable? I will be honest with you, I haven't played against too much Venture in my games when I do play, but I have definitely heard the concern of how Venture makes it really hard for supports to be able to react to, and that's where people are calling for nerfs. Now, I would like to see, and I don't know if this is possible, and maybe this is just me, and actually somebody just mentioned it in the chat here too. Is it me, or is it at times hard to even hear the Venture? So I feel like what needs to happen is they need to find a way to bring some more sound to Venture's ability, so when they move in to go for a play, you have a better understanding. Like, you hear, like, the sound of when they're going to go up on you, but at that point, it's too late, right? It just feels like too late. So I would like if their burrow was a little bit louder, right? Just a little bit louder. You know, we don't want to make it so remember when they increased footstep sounds randomly one season on accident, and you can hear Widow from across, you could hear a Widow on a different map? I'm not asking for that, but I'm asking for a little bit more of that counterplay. And that counterplay is not with cooldowns, it's with positioning, right? You can reposition yourself a little bit against how a Venture plays. I would like if they were able to do that, to adjust their abilities like that. But at the same time, it becomes one of those things where, you know, that I think would be the play. Where would you nerf some of the damage maybe? Get rid of some of that, you know, maybe they could focus more on like dot damage again. But I think like, what if they just started with the footstep adjustment? I think if they started with the footstep adjustment, that'd be a great start. Or not even the footstep, the underground burrow, like, adjustment. I think that's where you would do that and then go from there. That way you're not really making the hero unplayable, but you're making the hero more counterplay. Next we have from Sassy Ghost is Lifeweaver is actually quite strong versus Venture. Tree counters their ult. His platform is a great counter tool versus their kit. Yeah, true. I mean, I can't say that you can't save your teammates with Venture. I think at that point it's going to be more about you being able to make like a really good play as Lifeweaver, but I think you could say Lifeweaver is good against that stuff in general, right? For example, and I love that we're bringing this up for Lifeweaver. You can block Sigma's ultimate with your tree or your petal by just putting it in the center of the ultimate. So there's a lot of things that Lifeweaver can do that are really good. So yes, in theory, as Lifeweaver, you can help your teammates against those plays, but it also requires you to pay attention to those plays, and there's no guarantee to that. That's why, like, I still think the footstep increase would be like or not the footstep. I don't know how you explain the footstep under the ground with the burrow. A burrow sound increase would be great. I think that could help a lot with players who are struggling against kind of that backline pressure of Venture. But Lifeweaver, yeah, I mean, Lifeweaver is good against a lot of things. You could say that for anything. Like, Lifeweaver is good against EMP if you hide away from an EMP, because you can tree after the EMP to get your teammates burst healed up, and you can pull somebody away from the EMP, right? Lifeweaver in general is good against a lot of kits. It just depends how you play that. So we have a whole damn novel right here. I mean, when I say this is a novel, this is a novel. Like, this might be over a 200-word essay. Okay, Jesse says, maybe it's just my rank and a skill issue, but I feel like the game didn't need another flank and DPS hero. I really like Venture in theory, but in gameplay, it feels like we now have too many things to keep track of as is, and now we have to watch out for these quiet sound cues along with another messy VFX cluttering up the screen every team fight, along with everything else. I'm going to stop at the first paragraph here and go by each one. I mean, this goes back to what we said. I think they just need to increase the sound levels, right? You can't, like, you can't expect them just to add like a Cassidy or a Soldier 76 type hero every single time. One of the cool things about Overwatch is a lot of different play styles, a lot of different heroes you can play. I like that. I like that the game doesn't have just, you're not just going to go, here's a Cassidy hero, here's Ashe, you're going to play range, you're going to do that. So the flanking type hero Venture does, I actually like the concept and the idea. But this goes back to what we just said. It's really the lack of the sound that players are struggling with when it comes to that. It doesn't mean that the damage output isn't high. Even when I'm in top 500 games and there's a Venture, I will get surprised. I will be surprised when I get hit by a Venture sometimes, right? Because the lack of that sound and the lack of knowing they're kind of like going on those plays, right? It's kind of like, you know, when you have a Tracer, you can hear the blink. You know what I mean? You hear the blink from Tracer. If there's a Genji nearby, you can hear the dash. You can also hear the deflect. So you have these sound cues for flankers that are like super helpful. And that is where Venture, the sound cue is meant to be the burrow up. You can hear the, you know, the burrow up, do the damage. You know, that's where you hear that. But the problem is everything else. You kind of, the lack of the sound cue from the burrow, it just feels like it's a little bit too light on the sound. And if they can increase that, it would feel better. So I know we keep kind of going back to that, but that's what I would like to see. You go to Kiriko to counter, but now you decide if you want to cleanse for Venture, Doom, Ana Nade, Genji Dash, etc., etc. People complained about Suzu, but now it suddenly doesn't do enough as a result of one more hero being added. This is where I'll disagree. That you can't expect Suzu to be able to take care of everything. Suzu does more than enough against a lot of this stuff. I'm telling you right now, even when Venture probably comes into the game, and it's like the meta, we might see the meta eventually have Venture in it, we don't know. Kiriko is a great selection. I'm straight up. You can literally spam the floor with Cleanse on any of the Venture's plays, and you already deny that play, plus the burst heal, plus your other teammates surviving, plus you can swift step out. Kiriko is the least of the worries I have on this one. Suzu is good. I think Suzu will still continue to be good against Venture. Then they go on to say, you go Ana and sleep the Venture, and they tunnel away. I mean, that's counterplay. Another hero that's built to survive when they go in deep. A win-win situation for them, similar to Genji Dash. Where's Genji Dash getting this much value? Except at least he's not invulnerable or a Sombra TP, but at least you can track where Sombra's going to end up. Same with Tracer Recall. But you can see the Venture go away. Like, it sounds like you want the counters to, like, hard counter. The switch, and the switch to Overwatch 2 was meant to create soft counters. Venture is designed to be a kind of a all-in risk-reward style hero. That's kind of where it's at. Like, you can still sleep the Venture, especially when they go up, just like you can sleep a Doomfist when they ult. You have your timings to sleep them. More than likely, people will get better at that, but yeah. So I don't kind of see where that is with that, but we'll see. You go BAP and use Immortality, and now you have the same situation as Ana and Kiriko. One of the most important cooldowns used for someone who can just escape and lose a second or two of their own cooldowns. The trade isn't worth it, and Venture wins 90% of the time in that situation by either getting a kill or two or drawing out the most useful cooldowns from the supports, and all they lose is the ability to move for a couple of seconds before they can go again. Yeah, but like that's any hero. You can't expect that the Venture can't go in and never get anything done. Like think about the flip side of this. What if they made it so Venture goes in and then you can't do anything? Like you don't ever do anything. Like that's not going to be fun, right? Like it's just not going to be fun. The hero needs to be able to do something. You're not just going to go up there and be like, "Hi everybody, having a good day? I'm just looking for some archaeology. Okay, I'll see you later." Right? Looking for some artifacts. I'll see you in like, you know, like that's not what you're what would you do at that point? They wouldn't do anything. So like there needs to be some heroes have that type of style. You go in to bait out a cooldown. It's funny because you mentioned Sombra's TP and like that. That's what Sombra does. You go in, you bait out a cooldown, you leave. You know, yeah, you can follow up, but you can still follow up on a Venture. You know, maybe you could argue maybe the burrow lasts like a second too long, but like it sounds like you want all these like abilities you have as support to be able to prevent everything from happening. Sometimes they're not. Like if you use Lamp and you survive, you're probably going to be fine. And if they go in for another rotation, that's where you need to make the adjustments off of that. So I understand the frustration level. That's why I want to find like a fix that will not make the hero terrible, but make it so you can just hear them and have more counterplay to that. So we'll see. But I'm not saying that Venture isn't playing well in some ranks. It's more along the lines of there's other approaches they can do rather than make it so you're Ana sleep and your Kiriko Suzu and your Lamp are better because of Venture, or to nerf Venture and make them not do anything, right? This next subject we're going on here is tanking. Great subject. As you know, tank right now. As of now, I don't know when this video will be out. Maybe they come out with a random patch in the next few days when we do this. Tobias says, I don't play the game much anymore, but tank in competitive at low plat is a hog and Mauga fest whenever I am on. Now, I don't know if that's the case, just because I don't play in plat, but okay, that's fair. You mentioned Zarya is not in a good spot, but that seems like a higher rank issue. I don't remember what I specifically said about Zarya. I think it's more along the lines of, yeah, Zarya in top 500 can struggle. I do think that, I've talked about this quite a bit, I do think that players take the don't shoot the bubbles a little bit too literal as Zarya, and I think that Zarya in some ranks gets a lot of value. What I try to say with Zarya is that an out-of-position Zarya with no bubbles, you can absolutely shred, but a lot of players are so adamant about never shooting the bubbles that a Zarya will run at you with one bubble on an 8-second cooldown because they've used them so quickly, and players won't shoot that bubble when they're running at you because they're afraid to charge them even though the Zarya is already fully charged, and they worry so much about not killing the Zarya that the Zarya just keeps getting position and gets value and just dominates your team, right? Which creates a frustration level because you see an out-of-position Zarya, but nobody wants to shoot the Zarya bubble because the whole concept that people say is don't shoot Zarya bubble, but if a Zarya has 70 energy and they're in front of your team, and if you shoot the bubble, they're at an 8-second cooldown, that Zarya, in theory, should fall over, right? But so many players don't shoot that, so when you don't shoot the bubble, that gives them time to get their next bubble, and then they have a constant bubble rotation. Sometimes shooting the bubble can break that bubble rotation, especially when they're out of position, which is why in top 500, you don't see Zarya played as much because Zarya, the moment that players count the bubbles, and my recommendation is always count 3 bubbles. I know there's 2 bubbles, but the first bubble is usually where it starts. Then you have the second bubble, and then usually it's the third bubble. If you see them pop both bubbles, go for the Zarya. If you see 3 bubbles used, that's your timing. But sometimes, you know, if the Zarya just pops both bubbles right away, you can do the same thing. But I usually count 3 bubbles. It generally goes well if the target focus is there. Anyway, in plat, Orisa regularly gets destroyed by Zarya, which once again, I get that because a lot of players will run at the Orisa, and that's why I always constantly hear in my games, like, why are we... Okay, we'll be watching OWCS, and they're like, dude, just go Zarya. Like, why aren't they going Zarya in this OWCS game? They have Orisa, just go Zarya. That's it. Just go Zarya. And it's like, that's not how it's going to work, because that Orisa is going to hide behind a corner, use their cooldowns, and then roll the Zarya, and it ain't going to matter. But I understand that in plat, when you're playing it a little bit differently, and it's not like this, like the, you know, top 500, etc., that because players are letting Zarya run at them freely, the Orisa's cooldowns won't be able to compensate, especially if used incorrectly or if they take poke damage. So, the thing about Mauga and Hog is that people love shooting the tank, and Hog and Mauga just don't die unless you have an Ana throwing her nade on cooldown. I can see that. I don't even have to go into a deep discussion. I even see that in top 500. We will have a Hog connoisseur in our games. No one wants to kill the Hog. If you don't have an Ana, the Hog has a lot of survivability. Generally, my recommendation is try to find value elsewhere, but it's easier said than done. Rein seems to get destroyed by about everything. Yep. Except on maps like King's Row, where high ground isn't used much. I mean, still gets destroyed on King's Row half the time, if not more. I haven't seen a Queen or Ramattra in ages. Question on that one. Queen, I understand. Whenever I put Ramattra in B tier, I had a lot of people saying, why don't you not have Ramattra in A tier? So maybe that's just like, kind of like how you're seeing that, but... Or when you play, you're not seeing Ramattra, but I've heard Ramattras in games a lot, and people were very surprised I had Ramattra in B tier, which I will say, I am leaning a little bit towards that A- tier now, especially seeing some of the value in OWCS. So that's why I always say, sometimes when we make tier lists, or sometimes we like kind of change things around, that could shift. And I think Ramattra is a hero that is slowly climbing up there a little bit. So Sigma is pretty good. Yep, D.Va and Winston are okay, although Winston can get counterpicked pretty heavily by the DPS. I think that's a Reaper issue you'll run into. Winston, I think, is really good. But I do know that a lot of players default to go in Reaper and like Plat, Gold, etc. So I think Winston's a lot better than just okay. But in Doom, you know he's okay. The problem is he gets counterpicked by every role, even harder than Winston. That's true. And the moment you see a Doom the next fight, we'll have a Cassidy Sombra. That happens to be in quick play, so I get that. Maybe a Hog or Orisa, and suddenly you can't do anything anymore. So yeah, I've gone back to my roots, and I play Mei now. You know, you're not the first tank player to tell me that right now, they're just going back and playing DPS to support in the meantime. If you feel like as a tank player you're struggling right now, it's not uncommon. Tank is struggling a little bit right now. What the direct answer to that is, I have no idea. There's a lot there. It's such a unique conversation with tanking because I also liked the Season 9 changes as a tank player. I think it was good for the game in the sense of like, it made it fun for a lot of people, except for the tanks. So now how do you bring it back for tanks to make tanks a bit more of a viable pick and a more viable hero in those type of situations, right? That's the question here. You know, that goes to the balance team. I'm sure they're working on some things and figuring things out. But if you feel like as a tank player right now, your tank games are a struggle, even more so than they ever have been, that is not uncommon. I imagine tanks all the way from bronze to top 500 are feeling the same way about that. Now we have randomize here. The thing is right. What thing? Orisa is struggling to die because of the armor and lack of crits during Fortify. Yes. What if tanks have a passive to reduce crit damage by 20%? I'd have to see breakpoint numbers, maybe. I say that because, hear me out. I say that because I don't know how the numbers would be. You don't want to make all the tanks unkillable either. Like, as a tank player, I'd love that, but then I want is it bad that I want every role to have fun? Like, even as a tank player, like, I want to see the support player and I want to see the tank, the DPS also have fun. If you give me every tank to be unkillable, that also becomes a problem, which is why I don't want to see too many Band-Aid fixes, but at the same time, maybe. I've never tested the game with reduced crit damage. Maybe that helps. Maybe that's enough. Maybe tanks are still killable. I don't know, maybe. If you answered what passive, that was a good answer. Because, yeah, it feels like even now with the boop passive, I still get booped a million miles, especially with, like, the Lucio change. Doesn't even matter, right? It feels like it was there at the beginning. You could notice it now that everything has changed in Overwatch a lot and you have more of, like, the boops happening. You just get CC'd anyway. You're like, yeah, wow, great. I am under the assumption that my game doesn't even have the tank passive. It just isn't there. It didn't get patched in. I need to, like, verify my game files because I think it's missing the passive. Obvious numbers and abilities will get tweaked by it. Yep, which I agree. You would tweak the numbers on that. But this would mean tanks wouldn't explode as much constantly because of their massive hitbox. This also helps tanks versus one-shots like Widow and Hanzo from taking one shot and a half of their health is gone. Helps all tanks without armor. You know, maybe they could use ideas like that or concepts like that and give it a go. Two things you can do to fix tank. Passive, tanks receive an additional 15% increased healing at all times. This means that if you're antied, you still receive 15%. The DPS passive could be buffed back to 20% in compensation. Oh, this is a tough one. No. But there's something some of this works, but I think we'd run into, like, the issue where, remember when, like, Season 8? Remember with Season 8, like, tanks weren't, like, things weren't dying and it was a frustrating experience? I don't want to circle back to that. And I'm not saying that your idea here is bad. This goes back to the passive stuff. These are the things that why not test it on the quick play version or something like that they could do. Or create a card for that just to try it out, right? And then you say tanks also need a bit more lethality on their... Lethality, I don't know, I'm probably saying the word wrong. On their easy-to-hit abilities. Ryan's Hammer, Ramatra's Pummel, Winston abilities in Primal, and probably some others. Junker Queen's Carnage already received this buff. Oh yeah, that would make sense. Okay, what they're saying is just giving a little bit more damage. They're just saying give a little bit more damage to the tank on those abilities. That makes sense just because of, like, the Season 9 changes. Yeah, they probably can do a run-through of that, right? Basically what they're saying is go look through the heroes that have these damage abilities that are struggling against other abilities, right? And what that means is, like, more HP means that your damage is less valuable than it was before, so maybe you could do that a little bit. So that makes sense. Like, I could see them doing something like that. Kind of like Junker Queen, I think, went from, what, 90 damage to 105 damage to compensate for the Season 9 changes. Maybe that could happen, so. All right, last one we have coming up here. 4 comments on wide groups, which wide groups have been a hot topic. A very, very, very hot topic in general throughout this, right? A very, very hot topic. So we'll see what people have to say. So now we have I Am Hush talking about wide group. They say, to be honest, this wide group stuff is too strict. People I was able to play with before are now considered wide group. Doesn't make sense. One thing I'll agree on, and I don't know what rank you're in, but yeah, if your group wasn't considered wide before this patch, it should not be considered wide now. Crane says, let solo players opt into wide queue games as a toggle on the side with an expected queue time. I'd rather take a 2-minute wide queue versus an 8-minute narrow queue some days. You know what? I don't mind that. I never thought of that. I don't know if they could actually make that happen. But, like, I kind of like the concept of that, where you could... Because it would increase the player pool on the side of things. You can opt into it, so it would look for a narrow group game first, but if it was going to give you a wide queue... You know, I kind of like the concept of that. I don't know if how easy they can do that, but I like the idea. Just think about it. The problem they run into with the wide queue right now, right, is because it needs to find someone or games at the same equal playing field. If you have a top 500 and a bronze queue together, it's going to look for a top 500 and a bronze. It may not be able to match the roles, but it wants to find top 500, bronze. So if you have players who can opt in to be a solo queue player to fill into those games, especially when you have the 3 stacks who need that. Even a duo queue, technically. I mean, there's just some concept there. I like the idea of that, because then the trade-off is you're going to be in those games. That's the trade-off. I don't know. It's interesting. I never thought about that one, and I don't know how you would be able to do that, and how would that affect, like, narrow queue times, but I wonder if that would be better. I don't know, but I wonder if there's a way they could test that. I like that. I mean, I've never thought of that idea. It's an interesting idea, right? I'm not saying it would work, but it's a change or an idea I haven't really heard too much of. It's interesting. I don't know if they could do it or if it's possible, but it's an interesting idea. I can give you that. All right, now we have K-Web. They say, my overall solution, I am no expert, for the wide queue issue is to build a system in a spectrum that grows wider the longer the queue goes. I think they have that, though, but I want to read the rest of that. They definitely have a system in place that the range they look for increases over time. That I do know. So say you're a plat and silver together, and the game is looking for another plat and silver duo for you to match against. After, let's say, 5 minutes, the queue will widen, resulting in the queue looking for people of a higher or lower skill level. To compensate for drastic queue widening, I would simply reduce the rank progression as the queue gets wider, so people can at least play games and continue to grow. The only stipulation for this being that no wide group will ever transfer over to narrow queue. As far as how to fix the problem with high-level play and queue times, I would just make GM who pairs with another GM a narrow queue. I think they've already done that. Regardless, rather than making it within a 3 system that's special for that rank ceiling. Once again, I kind of like that. You're looking for wider games, but then there's the trade-off of that you might get a bit more of a difficult game, but then you have the rank progression thing, right? Like, some people are getting like 3% in a rank progression game. I kind of like it. Once again, I don't know how it would work, but I'd rather see them build off the blueprint they have now rather than keeping what they have. I really, really, really want wide queues to work. And the reason being is because I love the concept of having players who can come back to the game, play with their friends who still play the game. A lot of players, especially in free-to-play games, like to rotate through games, right? Month of Overwatch, having a blast. Okay, but now a new Apex patch comes out. They want to go play Apex. Oh, a new Valorant agent. They're going to go play Valorant. A lot of the players will do that rotation, right? But maybe your friend doesn't want to play those games and wants to play Overwatch. You both were in silver when you started. They've now climbed to plat. They've now climbed to diamond. They've had a great go with things. But now your friend wants to play, and you can't play with your friend. So that's why I want the idea to eventually work, because I love the concept of that, right? It's still very much a work in progress. It's still very much at the beginning. Am I not worried about the games being poor quality, though? I mean, I think they call it kind of like silly matchmaking, right? You're expecting your wide queue games to be a bit more wild, to say the least. That's expected. I'm not going to act like I know how an algorithm works with matchmaking, or how their matchmaker works, or what they do, etc. You know, the only thing I know is that every one of my games is expected. Apparently, I'm just always expected to win, because I just win so much that I'm just so dominant at Overwatch that I'm always expected to win. Never expected to be the team that loses. What can I say? By Arista gameplay. It's no big deal. For our last comment on this video from YouTube comments, and if you haven't figured this out by now, leave comments in the comment section, because there's a chance we're going to have these up on future YouTube videos like this. So, Kaylin says, sorry if I butchered your name. Funny how they add the competitive wide groups in a game with 5 people on each team. If only there were a number close by that was divisible by 3 and 2. Is this a 6v6 thing? Yes. Yep. You know what? I was reading the sentence. I went through it, and that's where it went. There's... How do I explain this? Because, like, I've talked about with 5v5 and 6v6 how I've enjoyed both, so my take on this is not really what people look for. I don't think that would fix the overall problem that you're seeing here. Because then, to give you an idea, one of the issues and reasons why they shifted to 5v5 also was because queue times for tank were just... It made every other role. It made every other role have to wait forever. To give it, like, I had seasons, I'm not even kidding you. I had seasons in Overwatch 1 where I got close to 2,000 games. Now, first of all, you're going to go, well, that's a you problem. You're the one who queued on 2,000 games. 2,000 games. Listen, that's besides the point, okay? But it's because my queues were so instant because nobody was queuing tank. So we won't go into a full discussion on that. I'll let the comment section kind of take this one over. My take on it is I've enjoyed both 5v5 and 6v6, so that's where I'm at with it. I know that's not the answer people look for. I know people want me to go, no, just go this way. I've been playing the game for 8 years. I enjoy the game. Anyway, I hope you liked the video. Make sure to hit the like button. Subscribe to all 3 YouTubes if you haven't. If you want to put some comments in there, hot takes, discussion points you want me to talk about in videos, put it in the comment section below. That also helps too when you comment, algorithm, all that stuff. Also, if you ever want to like submit stuff, you know, put stuff on there. My Discord is where you would do that. So look for the Discord below. We also record these live on stream. Sometimes I don't know if you'll see the Twitch chat because I recorded with this giant camera right here. So you might see the Twitch chat, you might not. But we have a lot of fun here, so stop by if you haven't. And with that being said, I hope you all have an amazing day/night.